right, we'll get started for this evening. Welcome, everyone. My name is Andrew Danny Prasad, and I'm a minister with the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada and a campus minister here at the University of Toronto. On behalf of the Relevant Series team, the staff, the volunteers, the guest speakers, we just want to welcome you tonight for our first talk of a week-long talk on faith, science, arts, and so many more topics. So if you haven't done so already, please check out our website, relevantseries.com, and you'll see the schedule for this week. We have lunch talks, we have evening talks, and events throughout the whole entire week. So be sure to check that out when you can. I'll invite up Norman, if you could just come.
Yeah, so just wanted to take a couple minutes and a moment here to just really appreciate something that we're doing. We're holding this awesome discussion event where almost as many people as my lectures show up. There's people from all different backgrounds here, just to listen to what we're about to. We're about to listen to, loneliness and a culture of connectivity. So we're all members, students in and around the Toronto community. Lots of you will be at the U of T as well. As Christian organizers of this event, we believe that all land and all peoples were created equally in God's image. And so we want to acknowledge that the land on which U of T lies is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee Nation, the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations, and the Métis Nation. And we want to take this time just to thank these First Peoples who continue to live on these lands and care for them even to today, and whose relationships to these lands existed long before the nation of Canada. We are grateful to be able to live, learn, and play on these lands. So with that, I'll just hand the time back to Ashley.
Thanks so much, Norman. So our agenda for tonight, I'll give you a quick rundown so you get an idea of our format. We're going to hear from our main speaker on the topic of loneliness in a culture of connectivity. And afterwards, we're going to have a Q&A time, a question and answer time. We'll use a website called Slido. If you haven't used that before, we'll give you the information about that. But you'll go on the website, there's a tag, a code that you'll put in, relevant 2023, and feel free to ask your questions. And since many of us are coming from different backgrounds, faith backgrounds, worldviews, let's just show everyone respect and courtesy when we ask our questions or just talking to our neighbors after the event. And let's also show our guest speakers and each other just courtesy, as we would want to be treated as well too. So tonight I want to introduce our main speaker, Dr. Alan Fung. Welcome. Dr. Alan Fung is a staff psychiatrist and the physician lead at Mount Sinai Hospital Wellness Center at Sinai Health. And he's also a faculty member of the University of Toronto Optometry Faculty of Medicine. And he is also professor fellow of Wycliffe College at the University of Toronto and a research professor at Tyndale University in Toronto as well. Dr. Fung is the incubate chair of the World Psychiatric Association section on religion, spirituality, and psychiatry, and vice chair of the American Psychiatric Association caucus on spirituality, religion, and psychiatry. He's also a distinguished fellow of the APA, and Dr. Fung serves as the incubate president of the APA Ontario District branch. So let's give a round of applause and welcome Dr. Alan Fung. Thank you.
So I was asked to talk about this topic, loneliness in a culture of connectivity. I don't intend to do a talk per se. What I'm trying to do is to present some information to you and stimulate some discussions, and hopefully we'll have a good time. I want to actually thank my colleague, Dr. Karen Wang, who has kindly agreed to be a panelist for tonight. So she'll be introduced later on tonight. Okay, so just to begin, it says here, everyone seems normal until you get to know them. So I just want to get to know people in this room a bit better. Who in this room was born in 1997 or later? Would you mind raising your hand? Thank you. There is a reason why I asked this question. Okay. And who knows what the acronym FOMO, FOMO means? Okay, who don't know what that means? I didn't know actually, before tonight's talk, so we'll talk about that later. So Okay, so the next part is I want you guys to be participating in tonight's event as well. So I know the seating arrangement is a bit tricky, but in groups of 3, I'm hoping that you can share with each other your name and any special meaning behind your name, and also share with each other one reason why you're attending tonight and one thing you're hoping to get from this session. So we'll spend a couple of minutes on that. Please begin. So the reason why I asked, who were born in 1997 or after, is that, you would belong to the Generation Z. So Generation Z would be people born basically from 1997 to 2012. So most university undergrad students would fall into the Generation Z. So there are some bad news. Generation Z is the most stressed out generation right now. Now, that's actually based on one study, so you don't have to believe in that. But I want to show you, some data from this. So this organization, they did a survey of 4,000 people across different age groups. So that was done in May 2021, right in the midst of the pandemic. What they actually found was that Generation Z has been experiencing more mental health issues than any other generations right now, or at that time. So they were giving some numbers. So you can see that mental health across generation. So percentage of people who rate the mental health as good or better by generation. The oldest, the silent generation, 86%, compared to Generation Z, 42%. Is anyone surprised by that number? Or would you think otherwise? Like, would you think that older people, should feel less happy? Because a lot of people would expect, the other way around, so a lot of people are surprised. So not only that, so when they go into, some details, they found that nearly half of Generation Z is struggling with feelings of hopelessness, as well as a bunch of other things. Low energy, sleeping too much, feeling down, hopeless, depressed, low appetite, things like that. That doesn't look good. So people have been speculating what's going on. What's the reason? Why Generation Z, when they are the youngest generation in this survey, should be the least happy? So people have proposed different things, but what I've highlighted there is loneliness. So some people thought that many individuals in the Generation Z spend the pandemic living alone. Loneliness may be playing a big role in the distress. Of course, there are other stressors, for people in this age group, such as, with the school, with work, or finding their future directions. Not only were they depressed, but they were also most nervous about resuming activities. Indeed, the top 3 feelings about post-pandemic life are nervous, scared, and disappointed. And you can see that, the numbers are highest, among Generation Z. So loneliness. I think all of us, would experience that at some point. But what is that actually? How do you define that? And how do we deal with that? So this website from the UK, a guide for young people on loneliness, has provided some good information. So what's loneliness? I think, no surprise to anyone. We can all feel lonely sometimes for many different reasons. Changes in our lives, moving to a new city, relationships or friendships ending, bereavement, things like that. Or if our friends don't agree with us. So even if we have many friends, on social media, we can still feel extremely isolated, when we don't feel that they are supporting us, when we don't get enough likes, on our posts, or if we feel we are bullied. We may feel disconnected even though we are technically speaking, connected with many people. So these are, just some situations, when people, might feel lonely. Again, moving to university, starting university, can be a very stressful time, and people might feel lonely. So some people say that, okay, is it a North American phenomenon that, younger people, feel more lonely? So this big study indeed is the biggest study to date on loneliness, conducted by a British team. It's called the BBC Loneliness Experiment. So in 2018, they surveyed 50,000 participants across all ages, 16 to 99, living in more than 235 countries, islands, or territories, about their characteristics and also loneliness. So they actually found that younger people and male and those living in individualistic cultures actually are more prone to loneliness. It's not just North America. It's a pretty interesting study to keep in mind. So some might say, how do we know that we are lonely, or how do we assess how lonely we are? We are not, a research class here, but I want to go into this scale a little bit. It's called the revised UCLA loneliness scale. It's the most widely used scale for assessing loneliness in different studies. So you'll see that there are 20 different items. I don't know if people at the back can see the items. So these are statements like, I feel in tune with people around me, I lack companionship, there is no one I can turn to, I do not feel alone, I feel part of a group of friends, I have a lot in common with people around me, I'm no longer close to anyone, my interests and ideas are not shared by those around me, I'm an outgoing person, there are people I feel close to, I feel left out, my social relationships are superficial, no one really knows me well, I feel isolated from others. I can find companionship when I want it. There are people who really understand me. I'm unhappy being so withdrawn. People are around me, but not with me. There are people I can talk to. There are people I can turn to. So for each of these, people are asked to rate, from never to rarely, sometimes, and often. You'll see that some statements are more positive, some are more negative, and it's deliberate. The total score, can range from 20 to 80. High score means high loneliness. So you see, these are how the scores will translate to degree of loneliness. So now that we have a bit of sense of what loneliness is, we have to go back to the title of today's, discussion topic: loneliness in a culture of connectivity. So this is actually not new. Social media making us lonely has been, a topic of discussion even back in May 2012, 10 years ago. So this article in The Atlantic, talk about, is Facebook making us lonely? Another article, from CBC, loneliness is on the rise in the age of connectivity. So this particular article, they talk about how tech and social media are making us feeling lonelier than ever. So probably, no surprise, constant virtual connections can actually amplify the feeling of loneliness. And indeed, when people spend too much time, on the internet, on social media, it gives you the perception of connectedness while you're actually spending all this energy on these virtual relationships, but not on the genuine, truly close relationships in real life. What's so bad about that? Well, so over the past decades, there have been many studies done on the health consequences of loneliness. Not only have people found mental health consequences, but also a lot of physical health consequences. For instance, this study is a review of systematic review. So it's a review of reviews basically, they look at systematic reviews from 1950 to 2016 in English language. And then they picked or they selected 40 systematic reviews in this review article. And they found that there have been consistent evidence linking loneliness and social isolation with cardiovascular and mental health outcomes. And these studies, just kept being published. So loneliness is bad for the heart, bad for your brain. It increases risk of dementia. So in this study, published a few years ago with 12,000 participants, loneliness can actually increase risk of dementia by 40%. It also changes your immune system. And so this study suggests that the pain of loneliness would activate the immune pattern of the primordial response, known as the fight or flight response. So it changes your ability to keep yourself healthy. And I was talking about FOMO, so FOMO is fear of missing out. So in this article, no more FOMO, limiting social media decreases loneliness and depression. So they actually found that when people are restricting or limiting their social media use, there's actually less loneliness and depression. So as you can see, loneliness can have various mental health and physical health outcomes. Indeed, the American Psychiatric Association also recognized the worsening of youth mental health during the pandemic. So you'll see that 1 in 3 young people experience poor mental health, 44% reported feeling sad or hopeless, 1 in 5 seriously consider suicide. So they think that connectedness makes a big difference. Okay, so not just the regular people would feel lonely. He's the wealthiest or second wealthiest person on the planet, Elon Musk. He admits that there are times that he will feel lonely as well. And he's saying that I'm sure there are times when everyone is feeling lonely. So in the group that you were in, group of 3 or 4, I want you guys to spend a few minutes to talk about what suggestions would you provide to Elon Musk regarding dealing with loneliness. Okay, anyone would like to share their recommendations for Elon Musk? Yes.
Sir, we agree that Elon Musk should give some of his money to other people so that he feel better from sharing his wealth.
Very good idea. 99%? Oh. Okay, great, perfect. Any other thoughts? Yes. Right. Keeping busy? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? Yes.
I was gonna say, I think because Elon Musk has sacrificed so much to get to the top of his field, you just kind of have to say, I sign up for this. So that's a sacrifice that I had to make to get here, and just live with that as being part of a life decision.
That's a very good point. I'm not touching upon this, but there are actually some articles talking about people who've chosen to be lonely to, so to speak, pursue a successful path. So that's been actually written about. Okay. So I would recommend him seeing a doctor, actually. Believe it or not, this article published in the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine, they are actually talking about doctors making connection prescriptions. So you're prescribing connection for your patient using the power of social interactions, for connectedness. Okay. For those who might be interested, I'm happy, to provide the reference, but basically, they're suggesting that, physicians should actually assess, their patients' social connectedness, using the FIT acronym, frequency and quantity of their social interactions, I, intensity and quality of the social interactions, time, duration of the interactions, and what type of interactions the patients are having, and then prescribe, connections. Okay. Other than seeing doctor, you can also, go online. There are plenty of articles talking about how to cope with loneliness. I'm not going to go into all the details, but just want to highlight, some common themes, across different articles. So, in this particular article, they talk about maybe joining a class or club, volunteering, contributing, to the community, finding support online, strengthening existing relationships, maybe adopt a pet, talk to strangers. Practice self-care, keeping yourself busy. If needed, seeing a therapist. Okay, so another website suggests the following. Well, focus on self-love, express your feelings, join a club, try volunteering, follow your passions, reach out if you're struggling. Again, I'm not going into the details, because I just want to, pick out some common themes, across different articles. Similar things here, 7 ways that people can try, explore ways to spend time together, be more social, check in regularly, share your feelings, do more things you enjoy, stay busy by learning something new, volunteering, joining online community. So all those are good, right? No surprise to anyone. There are 2 particular resources, that I would most highly recommend it. So this one is called 15 Things to Do If You're Feeling Lonely for Young People. It's actually published by the Mental Health Foundation in the UK. So in this particular handout, they're giving some suggestions, 15 of them actually. So they talk about how loneliness might feel to people and that, help is available. So 15 tips to empower you when you're feeling lonely. For example, reminding yourself that you are connected to the world, you are in control, you can embrace your creativity, pursue art or things like that. Reminding yourself that you are cared for, you deserve quality relationships, pursue your hobbies and interests, express your emotions in a healthy way, get curious about guilt and shame, not following the crowd, opening up about how you feel. It's not a weakness, okay? Joining a community, whether it's your hobby or religious group, finding peace in a busy world. Most important of all, be grateful for yourself. Take a moment to be grateful for even small wins in your life. The second resource I'll say is this social wellness checklist by the NIH, the National Institute of Health from the US. So similar themes, making connections, taking care of yourself while caring for others, get active. And for those with children, spending time with your children, you can influence them, bond with your kids, and building healthy relationships. And I just want to spend, a little bit of time on this, how to build healthy relationships. So again, no surprise to anyone, share your feelings honestly, ask for what you need from others, listen to others without judgment. All the things, would make sense. Again, I don't have time to go into the details. I've included all these slides, just in case, in the Q&A, people have particular questions, so we can go into, further details. But, to kind of summarize, to promote mental health or mental well-being, especially, during the pandemic, these 6 things are important. Social connection, staying active, managing stress, good diet, good sleep, and generating meaning and purpose. And I want to close with this thought, which I think is actually the most, for me, the most important way to combat loneliness, which is to live a purpose-driven life, or purpose-driven living, also known as purposeful living. So living a life with purpose as a way to combat loneliness and promote connectedness to others and the world. So different people have written about how to live a purpose-driven life. For instance, this particular author has suggested 10 steps to live a purpose-driven life. Think about what makes you happy, journal your daily activities, write your list of priorities, create deadlines for those priorities, finding tools to help you achieve the goals, create accountability, break down large tasks into actionable steps, get support from others, celebrate your successes, and pause and reflect on your accomplishments. So all good, all good. But for those of you who might not be familiar with a book called Purpose-Driven Life, I would strongly recommend that you check out the book and this website, Purpose-Driven Life, which talks about what on earth am I here for from a Christian perspective. I want to emphasize that, notice that I haven't talked about Christianity, up until my last slide, because I understand that, many people in this room may be from different backgrounds. So we, fully respect, people's, traditions and faith background, but I want to offer you to explore how Christians find the meaning, how Christians live a purpose-driven life. And with that, I'm just going to close for this part, and I welcome any questions and discussions. Thank you.
So before we go into the Q&A part, we're going to take a quick look at a trailer, a program that we're going to run, a course called Christianity Explorer, and I'll give you some more information about that. So let's take a look at that video.
You might be a convinced atheist, a committed Christian, or somewhere in between. Perhaps you've lots of questions to ask, or perhaps you're happier just sitting and listening. Maybe you go to church, or maybe you've never been. Whoever you are, Christianity Explored is a place for you to explore what life is all about. The Christianity Explored course is free, it's relaxed and informal, and it's run by ordinary people local to you. Some courses are held in churches with lots of people. Some are held in people's houses with just a few friends getting together. Wherever you meet, in each session, there's a chance to look at the life of Jesus for yourself and ask any questions you have. There's a short video to watch, and then a chance to chat about what you've just heard. You'll meet great people. You won't be asked to sing or pray or read out loud, and you don't need to know anything about the Bible to enjoy it. So whoever you are, come and explore. There's almost certainly a Christianity Explored course starting near you soon. So ask a Christian friend, or check out the website to find out more. You might just discover that the Christian message really is the best news you've ever heard.
So for those of you who want to explore more of the Christian faith and find out who Jesus is, the person who is at the heart of the Christian message, we're going to have a course starting next week right here on campus. Monday, January 23rd from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And overall, the course is free, it's informal, and it's just a relaxed 7 weeks course to go into the bigger questions about life and dive deeper into faith and bring any question that you have. We'll go through a short Bible study. We're going to look at a film and a discussion on the film. There's also going to be free food. So come, we'll eat, we'll have a good time together. And we're going to be doing that. Again, it's going to be starting next week. It's just 7 weeks, so sign up so you can attend every session there is. So tonight for our question and answer time, we have Dr. Wang joining us as our panelist. So I'm going to give a quick introduction for Dr. Wang, and I'll invite Dr. Wang and Dr. Alan Fung to join us in the front here. So Dr. Wang is a youth inpatient psychiatrist at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center. Prior to entering the field of medicine, she was also a high school teacher at the Toronto District School Board for 7 years. Upon completing her medical degree at McMaster University, she entered into the general psychiatry residency program at the University of Toronto, subspecializing in child and adolescent psychiatry. And since 2022, this past September, she has also taken on the new leadership role as the Director of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Subspecialty Residency Program at the University of Toronto. Let's have a warm welcome for Dr. Wang. So for us to interact with the question and answer period, you're going to see a slide there with a QR code. So you can either scan the QR code and it'll take you to slido.com. And over there, you'll see at the top of the website, you'll enter the code relevant 2023. So go to the website and you can enter your questions. Now, if you are, you can either enter your questions, or if you like a question and you want that to be answered, hit the thumbs up emoji, and then that is going to go to the top of the page. So we're going to take a look at the questions all the way to the top. So keep on upvoting all the questions that you want to be answered. I don't know if you can upvote your own question, but do so, so it can go to the top as well. So I'll give you a couple seconds to do that as well. And yeah, feel free to ask any question on the topic of loneliness and connectivity, on faith, and we'll take a look at your questions in a bit.
I wonder if Dr. Wang wants to
Yeah,
comment on this topic.
Sure.
So, just
Great. Okay. Can everybody hear me? All right. So as you're thinking about your questions, first of all, I just want to thank Dr. Fung for inviting me. And it's great to see so many people out here tonight. I think COVID has it's been so long, and it's really hard sometimes during the pandemic to connect with others, to actually have in-person sort of meetings like this. And so it really is a privilege to come out and to get to know some of you. As you had mentioned, I work as an adolescent inpatient psychiatrist. And so I predominantly see teenagers who are coming to hospital because of very severe psychiatric issues. And a lot of times they're coming in the very first time because of a suicide attempt. They're facing extreme loneliness. And it's very sad because a lot of times on the surface, you know, when you look at the exterior things of their lives, the material goods that they have, a lot of that is fulfilled. There's a lot of resources that they have exposure to. They have, you know, the support of their parents, and yet there's really nothing that satisfies that deep desire for connection. And oftentimes, I think in our society, we can get this impression that if we do enough stuff, if we have enough stuff, if we have enough friends, that we'll be able to quench this thirst of loneliness. And I'm not sure that we can. So even though, in spite of all of the excellent ideas which Dr. Fung has presented to you today, and which I highly recommend, and those are some of the same strategies that we would also recommend to people, to teenagers who are struggling, I think there's a fundamental fact here, which is that deep inside each of us, there is a degree in which others cannot know us fully. And in fact, in which we may not even ourselves know fully. We may assume that we can be fully known. And so that often creates a sense of aloneness, of separateness. And if we keep constantly searching for that thing, the next relationship, the next job, the next title to fill that emptiness inside of us, it becomes a very tiring search. So part of my proposition to you tonight actually is to come to a recognition and acceptance that loneliness is part of the human condition, and that out of loneliness does not have to be despair, that out of loneliness can actually be great productivity, creativity, and that if we can actually recognize and sit with others through their suffering of loneliness, that actually brings us closer together, much more so than utilizing ways to distract ourselves. So that's one thought for you to consider. I don't know if there are any questions that have sort of immediately come up, but happy to answer.
Thank you so much for that insight and reflection. And we have a couple of questions coming in already. So this is for either of you, so feel free to answer. Question number one, you shared studies or I guess this is for Dr. Wang, but please share your reflection as well. You shared studies and data linking loneliness and connectivity. Do those studies show correlation, causation, or both?
So, great question. I think people have debated, is it because, you spend more time on social media and then you get more depressed, or is it because you're more depressed and then you spend more time on social media? So the studies that I've seen, they're mostly observational studies, so they are not really looking at the causation per se, so mostly associations. And there are actually studies, showing that spending time on social media is not a problem. It's actually spending time, but not being connected. That's the problem. Yeah. So different studies, different.
Yeah, thank you. Any thoughts, Dr. Wang?
Yeah, I think that social media often can sort of promise something that is not entirely fulfilling. So it sort of gives us this perception that we can sort of be really intimately connected. And so when we don't really experience that through social media, it becomes almost even more of a disappointment in some sense. I think, social media can be very helpful in many ways in connecting people. I'm sure many of us during the pandemic, with our families, when we were all in lockdown and you couldn't go anywhere unless you were a healthcare worker, you probably met with your family and friends through Zoom. And yet I think most of us would agree that, those virtual interactions are sort of a pale reflection of a more meaningful relationship. So if you don't have that deep connection to begin with, it's not like all of a sudden just having that connection virtually is somehow going to transform the relationship. So I think social media offers something, but it doesn't fulfill all of our desires. Yeah.
Thank you. Our second question, what does faith in God help in improving loneliness? Or rather, how does faith in God help in improving loneliness?
So yeah, I can take a stab at that. So there are different ways you can look at that. So even if we are not talking about spiritual, we're not talking about just Christian faith, just spirituality, overall, has been viewed as one way to connect with the world as a whole. When I say world, it's a broad concept. You're connecting with everything around you. So spirituality in general has been shown to be helpful for combating loneliness. Again, I show you the purpose-driven life website as one Christian approach to finding meaning in life. One Christian approach to combat loneliness. Through faith. Through living, purpose-driven life, God-centered life, but you can argue that some people find way to combat loneliness, throughout the religion, if that works for them.
I think when you think about, I guess, religion in general, I mean, regardless of what sort of faith system you subscribe to, it provides, all major religions provide an organizing framework for how one lives their life. And I think that can provide a great deal of solace and comfort for us as we're going through these very chaotic times, right? So from a Christian perspective, the framework is that you understand where your origin is from, right? If you're a Christian, you believe that fundamentally there is a creator, there is a design and purpose to life in general. There is design and purpose to humanity. It organizes in terms of our understanding of ourselves, that fundamentally we have a relationship with our creator, we have a relationship with each other, but that it is flawed because of the concept of sin. And so, for many people, I think, the loneliness factor comes into play when you don't have a clear sense of who you are. You don't understand where you're going in this world. You don't know what your trajectory is. And Christianity does offer certain answers to those big essential questions. And so I think for many people, that's what brings them a sense of comfort, that they sort of know what they're beginning, And their end is going to be to a certain degree.
Thank you. Question number 3. I'll say in quote because it's not me asking, this is first person. Are you saying that I can't live a purpose-driven life if I don't believe in Jesus? End quote.
Yeah, so again, that's why, I presented, one person's perspective on the 10 steps of living a purpose-driven life, that's not framed in a Christian framework, so I want to emphasize, that there are different ways to live the purpose-driven life, the website that I presented at the end presented a Christian approach to living purpose-driven life, and that's by one Christian pastor, Pastor Rick Warren, the Purpose-Driven Life book, has sold maybe 40 million copies, worldwide, so many people find that approach helpful, but I'm not saying that people who decide to use other ways to pursue a purpose-driven life, cannot find meaning.
Thank you. Any thoughts, Dr. Wang?
No, I pretty much echo the
Okay,
same.
Thank you. Yeah. Isn't Christianity counterproductive to your medical advice? That was the question. There's not too much there, but any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure if somebody could maybe elaborate
Yeah,
on
that's
that
what I was
question.
thinking too.
Like what exactly do they mean by being counterproductive?
Okay, we'll come back to that one.
Okay.
Because that was just a question in itself. But yeah, if you're on the website, feel free to post that question or rephrase it, and we can get back to you on that. Yes.
I think it was a question that they elaborated, like.
Okay.
For example, God is in control, not you. You don't use your salvation, but can only use your grace.
Okay.
That's really- those were examples.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it's counterproductive to our medical training or medicine in general. I don't see how a belief in God necessarily would contradict or be counterproductive to actually the service of medicine. So, yeah.
Okay, we'll
Yeah.
get back to that question. For whoever asked it, we just rephrase it in a way or go a little bit deeper and rephrase that question. We'll get back to you on that one
And
as well.
I'll make one more point,
Yes,
on
sure.
that, which is, even though, as, Christian, physicians, we work, in a society, that, respecting, diverse, faith traditions, beliefs, so, we are respectful, of people who may not share the same faith, and indeed, having that kind of interfaith, approach, sometimes can be helpful, so I don't see that as counterproductive to our medical work.
Thank you. So we have another question here. Is there any connection between the strategies that you mentioned and the Christian faith? Any correlation there?
Meaning, I'm not sure if the question is whether using those strategies would enhance Christian faith, or would Christian faith enhance those strategies?
Yeah, so I think what they're asking is between all the strategies that you mentioned, is there like a link in a Christian worldview or in the Christian faith that reflect the strategies that you presented?
So again, I deliberately not mention about Christianity until the very last slide, and because I want to present that you can do all those things, using a non-Christian way. But as Christians, we approach things, with a Christian worldview, so we might do the same strategy, but, with a different worldview. So those strategies are not limited to Christianity, but Christianity or Christians, may have their way, of carrying out those strategies.
Thank you. How would you respond to people who had bad experiences at church when they tried to talk about mental health? For instance, somebody might have heard, just pray more, or the Bible says, don't be anxious.
Yeah, so I think this happens quite a lot. And I mean, just to give a little personal story, I mean, when I first went into psychiatry, like nobody could understand what I was saying. They thought, well, are you becoming a psychic? No, 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 I'm not going to become a psychic. And there was a lot of stigma within the church context in terms of if you have mental illness, if you're dealing with people who have mental health struggles, somehow this is going to affect you. And it was really hard. I think that oftentimes within Christian circles, there can be an acceptance that, you can be physically ill and that's not, your fault. It's either genetic, biological origins, but somehow if you're mentally unwell, then that's because of your doing, or perhaps you've made poor choices. And so there's a lot of stigma and blame for the person who's unwell. And I think I feel that part of my role in sort of entering this space is to actually start to increase that dialogue with people of faith to say, actually, in fact, mental health and mental well-being is really important. It's a whole, mental health is health. You've all heard that probably tagline from the Center of Addiction and Mental Health. We need to start acknowledging that human beings are complex and that we have multiple components. It's not just our physical bodies. We have a mind. And so, if that is not doing well, it is going to affect all other aspects of our functioning, of our relationships, and starting to let go of that tendency to blame and shame the individual. Yeah.
Thank you. Any thoughts, Dr.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Dr. Wang has said. Certainly, there's a lot of education, mental health promotion work that we need to do in faith communities, including Christian communities. And I think there are actual progresses. I think in recent years, we've seen that in different Christian congregations, and I would say probably in other faith congregations of other religions, people are having increased understanding of mental health. So I think there are fewer people who would say if you're depressed, just pray more, or you're depressed because you're not a good Christian, and you should only pray and should not use like, for example, medications or psychotherapy. So I think people are having much better understanding of mental health.
Yeah. Thank you. Another question here: how do you make connections or reach out when it feels like everyone else is busy and you don't want to bother them?
It's an illusion that everybody is busy and that they don't want to be bothered. I think a lot of times we have certain perceptions that people don't want to be bothered. And I find that oftentimes it's our fear of rejection, and we're afraid to ask and to reach out. And of course, there are times when other individuals are going to be occupied. But you try again. And I think that that's one thing that I would say that I've noticed, especially with younger people, is that there is a huge fear and worry about rejection, and that you ask once, and then if you get turned down, it's like, okay, you're never going to do this again. And so a lot of times, in my role as a psychiatrist, I'm counseling my patients, try again, don't give up. Social relationships take effort. There's a certain skill set that is required as well in terms of repairing relationships, maintaining relationships. Think about any other skill that you've learned: riding a bicycle, coming to class and learning how to make notes. You didn't give up after the first try. You kept trying. And it's the same thing with relationships. In our society, we've gotten so used to just canceling people out. If they disagree with us, if we run into conflict, we avoid that person. We don't want to have to deal with the hassle and the difficulty of maintaining these relationships. But if we want to have that connection, we are going to have to put in the effort, and we're going to have to try, and we're going to have to try again. Yeah.
That's really good. Thank you for that. Any thoughts?
Yeah, totally agree. And also keep in mind that people have different personalities. So if you approach person A, things may not match. But if you approach 10 different people, chances are there will be probably at least one person that you'll have a better match with. So totally agree with Dr. Wang's approach. Keep trying.
Thank you. Now, this is a personal question to you both. How do you personally deal with loneliness?
Can I go first?
Sure, I can tackle that. Yeah. So I really agree with what Dr. Wang was saying. First, I think we need to accept that, we all, have loneliness, at times, feeling alone. And that's part of life, it's not pathological, but making use of that time of loneliness to, reflect and hopefully promoting self-growth, I think, would be one way to kind of turn that loneliness, into a positive thing.
Yeah, for me personally, I mean, I remember distinctly during my 20s feeling quite lonely at university. And I think part of it was also, I decided to go away to Scotland to study in my third year. And then when I came back, all my friends had kind of moved on with their lives and I felt really disconnected. And I remember at that time, reading a lot of different writers, like spiritual writers, who had also struggled with these same sorts of feelings and had really worked through it from a theological perspective. And so I just want to share one quote from one of them, Henry Nouwen, who's one of my favorite spiritual writers. And he actually said that the cure for loneliness is solitude. So solitude is an inner quality or attitude that does not depend on physical isolation. Oftentimes when we think about solitude, we think about just sort of being physically alone, that there is that component to choose to be physically alone. But it's an inner quality, a stillness, a centeredness of being. And it takes time to cultivate because what you have to come to terms with is yourself. And coming to terms with who you are and accepting who you are. And I think that when you get to that place where you fundamentally can learn to accept yourself, you keep company with yourself. You're not going to be lonely in the same way. You're not constantly searching for some external validation, some other person to tell you that you're okay. You can actually be comfortable with who you are. And so out of that solitude, that development of solitude, that becomes an antidote, I think, to loneliness. Of course, I agree with what Dr. Fung also mentioned around community. And I think what makes for meaningful community relationships is when you have a common purpose and you're serving together. There's lots of opportunities for service. A lot of times our relationships are so sort of just focused on each other or focused on ourselves. But when we sort of look out and we see that this world needs so much, that there's so much that we can offer, and making service a priority, it sort of just draws us out of that sort of lonely center. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we have another question. A question about faith and loneliness. How does Jesus specifically bring a new hope to loneliness?
Do you want me to go first? Okay. Well, I mean, for those of you that have a chance to read the Bible, there are many times in which Jesus reminds his followers, and he tells his followers explicitly that I am with you. You are not alone. You may be going through very difficult times, but you are not alone. And that is a phrase that is frequently repeated throughout the Bible. Even in the Old Testament, when you read the accounts of God accompanying his people, the Israelites, through their desert journey, he's there. He's there in different forms, in different ways. And so part of the Christian faith is this constant reminder that we are not alone. We may face many difficulties. There may be a lot of struggles, but the promise is that we are fundamentally not left alone.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, totally agree. And
not sure if people have heard of the story of the footprint. So there was a person, who was walking on the beach, and so things were going fine, and eventually the person was encountering, some challenges and difficulties in life, and so initially, there was a person, a companion, walking with the person, and then eventually he found that there are only, one set of footprints left, when he was feeling, the challenges and the difficulties. And actually, even though the person was thinking that, okay, was he being abandoned, by the companion or God? The person actually found that God was carrying him. That's why there's only one set of footprint left. And so this is just, a story, to say that, even in the most difficult times, God is with us, God will help us.
That's good. Thank you. Another question we have, is loneliness situational? People often mistake the difference between sadness and loneliness. How would you define the difference, and what does it do to the brain and to your mind or mental health?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if we've done any like MRI imaging for someone as they're acutely experiencing loneliness. I don't know of any research studies. So
Probably, yeah. I haven't reviewed those studies, but I think, some of the studies, when they were looking at, the pain of loneliness, they look at how the immune system or the fight or flight response was triggered, and we know that the immune system is also related, to emotional control, and so I do think that, yeah, loneliness and sadness, they are not the same, but certainly loneliness, can lead to sadness, from the different studies. Yeah, I don't know if.
yeah, I guess, I mean, there might be some qualitative differences in terms of how one perceives oneself and the situation, right? Because I guess with sadness, I know I'm just theorizing here that, you feel sad about a specific situation, but with loneliness, I presume that there's like a very acute awareness of one's solitary state, that you are alone. So there's probably very distinctive types of like cognitive thoughts that arise with loneliness, and that you are somehow separated from others. Yeah.
Right. So certainly there will be times that, the person might be lonely, but not sad. But I think, with, so, when the person, has kind of an interpretive, component, to that loneliness, interpreting the loneliness as, being abandoned or, being rejected, then, it may lead to sadness.
Thank you. Another question, how can churches, youth groups, and campus ministry better support young people and combat loneliness?
Yeah, so I mean, I used to be a youth group counselor many moons ago. And one of the things that we would do is that we would just always get together. We were always hanging out together, and I would open up my home and people were always just hanging out at my house. I still have a policy at work where pretty much my door is always unlocked. And people just randomly, as they're going to the bathroom, decide to plop themselves on my sofa. I think, we can really create a spirit of hospitality for young people by remaining open. If you are a church youth counselor or you mentor youth, just signaling to them that you are available, that you are there to support them, and that even if there are difficult times, that you're there to help walk them through it. You might not have the answer. I certainly don't have answers for all of the teenagers that I see. They have many challenges in their lives, many of which I can't fix those challenges.
Mm.
But I think communicating that you're going to be walking along beside them, that you're still supporting them, that actually helps to combat a lot of the
Yeah.
loneliness as well.
That's good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any thoughts, Dr. Fung?
Yeah, totally agree. I think the church, playing a leading role, in organizing activities, promoting connections or connectedness, as well as, just recognizing that loneliness, disconnectedness, is a major issue, in young people. I think that's important.
That's good. Thank you. How does the studies deal with reporting bias? Could it be said boomers are lonely, but just don't want to admit it?
That's right. Old people have, big egos and they've got to maintain.
So that certainly, when you look at, the limitations, of the studies, I think we can all think of, biases, of the different studies. I think that the key thing is to, look at the results, from a variety of studies using different methodologies across different populations, and then we try to generate, similar, themes, from the different studies. I think the different studies, have all pointed to, for example, different health consequences from loneliness. And also young people, like the Generation Z, actually having a lot of stress, and which might be, contrary to many people's beliefs or hypotheses. Yeah, so that's something to recognize.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, our next question here. What would be a good daily habit to start in 2023 to improve our loneliness? So I think people want some New Year's resolution ideas.
I would say be brave. Reach out, try something new, try to reach out to somebody that maybe you haven't talked to for a very long time, and be brave to make that connection. You'd be surprised, oftentimes we think that we're going to be rejected. We think that they're too busy, whatnot. But if there's somebody that, you've been thinking about reaching out to for a long time and you haven't had the chance to do that, be brave.
Certainly agree with that. And I think also be compassionate. Be compassionate to yourself and to others, around you, including people who might have hurt you. I think that would be a way to promote connectedness with yourself and also with others.
Thank you. How would you advise an introverted person to make friends?
Very good question. So first of all, I do believe that everyone can make friends. Introverted person may tend to hang around with similar people, right? They may also have more friends who are introverted. But I think whatever their personality, as long as they keep an open mind, they are not afraid of not succeeding in the first trial, I think they can still make friends. So I just like what Dr. Wang was saying, keep trying. I think there will be some people who will match their personality and interests.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for some people who have, more introversion than extroversion, and I think we have to recognize that like human beings are not just all introverted or all extroverted. We have elements of both. If you do tend more towards introversion, you're probably going to feel more drained in like a very large group setting where you have to talk to 10 people at the same time simultaneously and trying to manage all of those social interactions. So for you, it might be more about being mindful and choiceful about who is that one person that you want to connect with. And, sometimes with social interactions, it's awkward in the beginning and you need to have certain conversations or topics to get sort of warmed up. And for some individuals that I've worked with who have tremendous social anxiety, so i.e. they're constantly worried that anything they say, they're going to be laughed at, or other people are constantly looking at them, they're in the limelight. We actually prepare specific topics that they would practice and rehearse. Now you might think, well, that seems really artificial. Like, shouldn't every conversation just be extremely natural and spontaneous? Well, not for everyone. Not everyone feels that like they can just spontaneously start an amazing conversation that's going to be really deep and they'll go for 5 hours. So we start off thinking about, okay, well, what would you feel comfortable sharing about yourself with one other person? And maybe even just thinking through, like, what would that script be? And so having sort of in your back pocket, even a couple of things that you would feel comfortable sharing about, and then allowing that conversation to then proceed. Yeah.
That's really good. And I'm reminded of at the beginning, we asked each other what our names meant, and that started a whole conversation, and we heard that people felt more connected. So things like that. So thank you. Yeah. Another question, when being the one that always reaches out, how would you approach the fact of the frustration in always needing to be the one to take the initiative within the friendships?
Sorry, can you just repeat the last sentence?
So I'll read the whole question again. When being the one that always reaches out, so I think this person's always reaching out and they're looking at, and they're frustrated in always doing that. So the last part says, how would you approach the fact of the frustration always needing to be the one to take the initiative within the friendship? They want the other person to also take the initiative.
So again, going back to something I said earlier about relationships in general, relationships take skill, they take effort, they take time. So let's say, for example, you are always the one making the first phone call. You're the one always checking in on them, and you're getting upset because the other person doesn't seem to be reciprocating in the same way that you would like. A lot of us would then just be like, okay, well then I'm just going to end the relationship. And some of us would then, or some of us might be, well, okay, well then I'm just going to keep doing it. But I think one of the other skills that we can actually develop is to be assertive around what we want and need from a relationship. And that's where it's difficult, because what you're really saying is, I would like you to also sometimes call me, or I would like you sometimes to initiate our dates. And for some people, you know, they don't know, in fact, that that's what you want. They cannot read your mind. In fact, even psychiatrists cannot read your mind. And so you need to start then thinking through, how am I going to present what it is that I want in this relationship to this other person in a way that they could understand and then reciprocate. And a lot of times, in fact, when you just tell them, you know, it would really make me feel so much more connected to you if you also initiated some of our get-togethers. You'd be surprised. A lot of times people are like, oh yeah, I can totally do that. I could totally do that. But they just had no idea. So I'm talking about a normal relationship, right? There are also toxic relationships, and those relationships are where literally you are giving 100% all the time, and the other person may be actually manipulating you, gaslighting you. And so we're not talking about those types of relationships. There are other red flags as well for those types of relationships. We're talking about normal, you know, relationships where there's give and take. You know, it's also about articulating to the other person what it is that you need and how it will actually benefit the relationship if in fact the other person also initiates.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. You said, so I think this is addressed to Dr. Wang. You said that solitude is about learning to accept and love ourselves. How do we do that if we've had a lot of bad experiences in life or seen those around us?
Yeah, so obviously if someone has had a lot of traumatic experiences, a lot of difficult interpersonal relationships growing up, that does start to form a template in our mind that somehow we're not lovable, that somehow we're unworthy of other people's affection and concern and care. And I would say that those those are kind of like tape recordings. Well, does everybody know what a tape recording is? Just kidding. I think tape recordings are now back in. So those are like tape recordings of our past that are playing in our mind. And oftentimes, you know, you have to stop and reflect. Are those tape recordings really legitimate? Or are those based on, you know, toxic relationships, negative experiences, but are not really a reflection of who I am? And sometimes for some people, it does take help, like professional help, to start to evaluate those negative scripts in our mind, right? I'm not saying that that's an easy process to do, because I agree, if you've had very abusive relationships, you are going to think of yourself in a different way. You're probably going to think of yourself in a way in which you're not lovable, and yet that's not the truth of who you are.
Thank you. Any thoughts, Dr. Fung?
No,
Okay, well, thank you. So another question here. Can you speak about vulnerability in relationships and its importance in building connection or friendships with others?
So, so first of all, you know, I think in a friendship, being comfortable or feeling comfortable to not be sure all the times, you know, or even not being in control all the times, you know, sometimes it's important. So, you know, on one hand, you know, we want to be, you know, assertive, you know, of our needs, you know, but at the same time, you know, when we are able to admit that, you know, we might not be sure, you know, we have our weakness, you know, it may actually let the other party, you know, feel more comfortable, you know, in a relationship. I don't know if Dr. Wang.
Well, I think that vulnerability and authenticity are sort of, you know, two sides of the same coin. And if we're talking about truly meaningful and intimate connections, you know, I don't see how you can have that type of relationship if you're not authentic and vulnerable. And I think this calls for wisdom too, because it's not like you're going to go out there and disclose all of your personal things to every single person that you meet. You know, there are some individuals that are going to have a much closer connection to you and whom you feel that you can truly be yourself, that you can share your struggles. And there are other types of friendships where it's probably going to be more about, you know, you have shared common interest, but perhaps it's not going to be so deep, right? And oftentimes I think, you know, there's almost like a rush to get to the extremely vulnerable state sometimes in our society, right? That we just disclose everything on social media about ourselves. I don't think that's actually wise. I think that friendships take time to cultivate. It takes time to trust another person and to also to demonstrate whether or not you're a trustworthy person as well, right? So you need time to slowly start peeling away those other layers where there may be, you know, a more a need to sort of maintain a particular superficiality bit. But I do agree, when it comes down to really intimate relationships, and you think about, you know, your lifelong partner is perhaps one of the most intimate type of relationship that you would ever have. You do have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to admit that there are certain areas of you that are perhaps not so great. And, you know, then hopefully you have another person there who's willing to accept you in those moments that you are vulnerable.
That's good. Thank you. Are there any psychological or physiological implications with respect to social connectivity that may be the direct result of feeling lonely?
So direct psychological consequences of feeling
Psychological or physiological implications with respect to social connectivity. So I think they're referring maybe to social media and those social interactions that may be the direct result of feeling lonely.
So I think, in some of the studies, we're talking about the loneliness, can certainly lead to low mood or frustration, and also even anxiety, and variety of physical health consequences.
Yeah.
I don't know if Dr. Wang, you have any thoughts?
Thank you. And we'll have our last question here, and we'll wrap up for tonight. How can we help out our friends who are feeling lonely without being affected emotionally by their experience?
I wish that there was an easy answer to that question. I mean, we're relational human beings, and things that affect the people that we care about will affect us. I don't think that there's an easy solution to that. Having said that, I think that part of developing, solitude and recognizing who you are makes it a little bit easier then to have that distinction between other people's struggles, their emotional response to their difficulties, and you. So I think you have to be very self-aware. You have to know, are you getting to a state where you're burning out because you're providing a lot of caregiving, you're spending a lot of time on the phone or text or whatever means you're using to communicate with this person? Are you starting to get really bombarded with this other person's issues that is really starting to interfere with your own life, right? So
Yeah.
you have to have that degree of self-awareness. And for some people, if they're starting to notice that, I have told my patients before, you need to take some time to perhaps step back. Don't abandon the person who needs help, but link them up with someone else who perhaps will be able to assist you, or perhaps they need professional help, because you can't be a therapist to all of your friends. You're a friend and you're going to do the best that you can to support them during their emotional distress, but you can't expect yourself to be a crisis counselor, to have your friends call you 24/7, right? You're not the emergency department, right? And I think sometimes we expect ourselves to do that for our close friends, but you have to also draw some boundaries around that too.
Thank you.
I was going to say, sometimes we get a related question, as a psychiatrist, so how do we maintain our mental well-being, when we are hearing, our patient stories, all day long, how do we keep our sanity? So I think, when we are doing our professional work, I think it's easier, for us to be empathic to our patient, but also not getting personally very involved emotionally. But it's different, when it's a friend or, when it's a family member. So I think we need to make that distinction, when we're dealing with personal relationships, we are not the therapists. Even though we may be a mental health professional, we are not acting in that capacity. We will be the friend or the family member.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you everyone for submitting your questions, and let's give a big thank you and round of applause to Dr. Alan Fung and Dr. Wang. And I just want to say a big thank you for all the Relevant Series team, the volunteers, everyone who is taking part today and throughout the week. A big thank you to them. So let's just show them a round of applause as well too. And if you haven't done so already, so check out our Relevant Series website, relevantseries.com. We have another evening talk tomorrow, and for the rest of the week, we have evening talks, and starting on Wednesday, we have some lunch talks on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, but you'll get all the information on there. So it's relevantseries.com, and be sure to fill out the feedback form if you haven't done so already. And if you're interested in diving deeper into the Christian faith and exploring life's big questions, perhaps you want to talk about loneliness a little bit more, fill out the feedback form and share that with us, and also sign up for Christianity Explored. It starts next week, and we want to continue to have that conversation with you. But thank you for coming for tonight. Have a good evening.